So the Pope's here, or at least he will be sometime later this afternoon. He's in Cuba right now. He's going to be arriving in Washington, D.C. at 4 p.m. later this afternoon, and that begins his first ever visit, not just as Pope, but first ever visit as anybody to the United States of America. So we're honored to have him coming, obviously, and we're a little on edge, I think, all of us. There's certainly been a lot of talk about what it is that the Holy Father might say. If you haven't looked ahead yet to the second reading on Sunday, you might want to do that. It's from our good friend St. James, who's always good for a real pick-me-up. And he has a very challenging word, which I would be surprised, quite frankly, if Pope Francis doesn't exploit in some way to speak to us about our responsibilities to take care of our brothers and sisters. Maybe just a couple of things to orient us for his visit. He's going to be in Washington, D.C. Today, tomorrow, and then Thursday. Then he heads over to New York City, and then he's going to conclude his visit in Philadelphia on Saturday and Sunday. That's going to bring to a close the World Meeting of Families, which is taking place this week. There's certainly been an awful lot of talk, a lot of anticipation, a lot of buzz. Some parishioners here from Our Lady of Good Counsel are over in Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families. They sent in yesterday, they said they haven't heard this many people talk about Jesus ever. So it's a great time and a tremendous opportunity of grace for us in our country. Two things maybe to orient us. Tomorrow, which is the first day of events planned for the Holy Father. This afternoon, there's nothing planned, which seems kind of strange, quite honestly. He arrives at 4, and then there's nothing on the agenda. So stay tuned for some last-minute additions, I would imagine. But tomorrow he meets in the morning with President Obama and then all of these people whom our president has invited, which has gotten no small amount of attention. There's an awful lot of people coming to that gathering, some of whom have gotten the headlines because they're known to be people who would be those who don't necessarily see eye to eye with the church. But here's what strikes me. Yesterday was the feast of St. Matthew. St. Matthew was a tax collector, and yesterday's feast was a most significant feast for Pope Francis some 62 years ago, which was when he really traces his conversion, which happened on the feast of St. Matthew after he had gone to confession that day. And he describes that event as going to confession without expecting much of anything to happen, quite frankly, and saying that it was as if there was someone there who was waiting for him, someone who had gotten there ahead of him. And at that day, he had an encounter, which is the key word for Pope Francis, an encounter with the person of Jesus. And the encounter with Jesus totally transformed his life. Tomorrow, there's a whole set of people who are going to show up at the White House, perhaps simply coming as a formality, perhaps expecting nothing. I would encourage us to pray that just like Jorge Bergoglio, back 62 years ago, who went into that confessional without expecting an awful lot, that those people who are there tomorrow, not expecting much, will have an encounter with Jesus through this man. Pope Francis radiates the mercy of God. Let's pray that that will happen for those who are there who do not think with the mind of Jesus on whatever the issue might be. Let's just really pray that that'll be a tremendous and momentous occasion for them. The second thing, just to orient us, I am fond of quoting Pope Francis, who was one of the principal architects from a document written back in 2007 by the Latin American bishops. And in that document, he says three things, which I think is one of the best summaries of the gospel I've ever seen, and I would suggest it's a great reflection for us in these days ahead, and it's the lens through which to see and to read everything that the Holy Father says. The three things are these. First, knowing Jesus is the best gift that anyone can ever receive. Second, that we have encountered him, there's that word again, is the best thing that has happened in our lives. And third, making him known by our deeds and our words. That's our greatest joy. So in these days which begin today, this momentous occasion of his visit to our country, let's pray that those who have not yet had the gift of encountering Jesus might do so. And let's pray that the Holy Father, in his words and in his deeds, might make him known.